Hello, nerds. Welcome to GeekBeast, part of the Geekish Network. This is your daily rundown of geek news from geeks like you. If you are just with us for Crosstalk, thanks for staying. If you're joining us just now, let's get into the news. I am your host, Summer Punch, and with me, we have got Sintel.
Yo, what's cracking? Yo, it is always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to work with you. I know this is going to be tons of fun. We got a busy news day schedule for us.
Hell
and
yeah.
I know you got the keys to the car. I get to sit back and watch you drive. Come on, girl, let's go.
A lot to talk about today, too. A lot of video game news. All right, so let's get into the huge news for today. And by the way, I'm loving these Monday vibes. Just get like straight into the news. Let's just talk shop about some video game shit, some nerd shit. I love it. I love it. All right, so Bungie has just been bought by Sony PlayStation, and the developer of Destiny and the original creator of Halo. So Xbox has basically bought Crash Bandicoot, and their acquisition of Activision, I think last week or the week before, I think that was for 69 billion. Yeah. It might have been billion. I don't know, something insane like that.
69 billion.
It's not a crazy jump, right?
Yeah.
So Microsoft just like splashed around in the news, and then Sony is like, wait, can I have a little bit of attention here? Their acquisition is not quite as big, not 69 billion, whatever the hell it is. It was for $3.6 billion though. So Sony buys Bungie, and Bungie is the original creator of Halo and the current developer of Destiny, the online first-person shooter that was formerly made by Activision. So it's kind of funny and interesting to see Activision being split into both these different directions. Activision Publishing going off to Microsoft, and then Bungie, which split from Activision a few years ago, being bought up by Sony.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of whole lot of swapping going on. You know, I was saying during our cross chat, if you happen to miss it, I was saying earlier that this really feels like two rivals fighting over each other's exes. Because you know, Crash was once a Sony property and now it's over on Microsoft, and now Bungie, same thing regarding some of the older Halo stuff. It's like to just keep swapping spouses, I guess that's the word. And it seems like this is still just the beginning. And the price tag, like you said, is so considerably different. But they are getting some, you know, something that's relatively interesting regarding the merger, and that is the possibility of maintaining the Halo video series. Please, I know Defunk is probably in there, probably pulling his hair out. Like, I didn't put that in there, but I think that's one of the things that's in there. Yo, how are you feeling about, you know, all this Spider-Man money being spent like this?
I mean, I think there's a few interesting angles to talk about with this story of the Sony acquisition and then the Microsoft acquisition. And this is also right after Take-Two had just acquired Zynga. So there's a lot of huge, massive acquisitions, like 1 week after the other, first month of the year, right before the end of the fiscal year too. And I think it's because their stock prices were low. People are pouncing to buy up those companies at a decent price while they are available. I know that's definitely was a big thought behind Activision acquisition, and the same thing with Zynga as well. But, you know, all of these huge players in the market just kind of eating up the rest of the definitely not little guys. Like, nobody would call Activision a little guy. Bungie is a huge, massive AAA developer. So it's all these behemoths gobbling up equally large or very huge developer studios or publishers. So I don't know. I think if you just kind of take a step back and look at, you know, what are the main console publishers, developers? That's obviously Sony with PlayStation, Microsoft with the Xbox and all its series, and then Nintendo, which has absolutely no fucking interest apparently in doing anything that Microsoft and Sony is doing. They don't even try to compete on the same playing field. They just have this almost completely owned platform where, you know, people will make their AAA games also for Nintendo, but really Nintendo has so many exclusives like Mario, and pretty much anything that Nintendo makes originally stays exclusive to Nintendo. So you have these three consoles, Nintendo, the Xbox and PlayStation, all vying for the best IP, but they're also not necessarily making it exclusive anymore either, because that's not really a strategy that's really been adopted. It's all about content, but not necessarily making your content exclusive to each platform, because they know that people are just going to kind of stick to whatever platforms that they've already been on. So I have a PlayStation. I'm going to keep buying PlayStations because all my friends are on PlayStations. I'm not even that big of a multiplayer gamer, but I'm still going to keep buying PlayStation because all of my points, all of my friends, everything that I have is on there. My full content library is on there. So, you know, I love Bethesda games. Bethesda had also been bought up by Microsoft. But it's unlikely that I'm going to just buy a whole new console just to be able to play the next Skyrim. Actually, wait, no, that's a terrible example, because the next Elder Scrolls, I think, is actually going to be exclusive. God, which fucking sucks. Okay, I am going to buy the next Xbox, but most people don't have that choice. Right? But yeah, you just see all these huge players, and now you just kind of have, if you don't count in Nintendo, because they're not really playing the same exact game, it's just Microsoft and Sony eating up everybody around them. So I don't know. Is that good for consumers? Is that bad? These studios are being funded, but there's also not a lot of competition.
Well, yeah, I think it's fine if you're doing what this merger with Bungie seems to be doing, and that is maintaining people's accounts on other platforms, because that's a really big deal. You want to have all this work, spend all your time developing your gaming accolades and points and all of that, and all of it be for naught. And then, you know, and it's just good for the developer as well in general, because with multiple platforms, it goes more, you know, multiple streams of income as well. I'm just curious as to, you said a name that has me really curious, and that is Nintendo. It's like, how much longer, you know, can they last? Because Nintendo seems to be just taking shots from all over the place. One of their largest platforms, the Switch, it seems to be getting some additional competition with Steam's version of their handheld gaming device. Everybody moving over to 4K this and and Super HD, that they've been more focused on just, you know, really like 7 or 8 like really good solid titles and milking that same thing over and over and over again. Are they going to be able to compete under their own power? And if not, who would you want to see Nintendo go to?
Interesting. I doubt that Nintendo would ever be acquired. If that happened, it would be just cause huge ripples throughout the industry. I don't know if they would sell to, I don't know. It's not like I know the execs there, but it would be an interesting dynamic to see that happen. Although I would bet that it just doesn't. I think that Nintendo, you know, like I was saying in crosstalk, like all of these major companies, their strategy is to go really deep and really wide on the franchises that they own, right? So they're owning strong IPs, they're building up their IPs. It's kind of like the Marvel approach, right? Like they took superheroes that weren't even their biggest, baddest superheroes, and they made them into, you know, they made an entire world and universe out of it. And it's been enormously successful, right? And people love Marvel. At least I do, and everybody who watches Marvel, which is everybody. And they keep going back to it, and they're just going to keep watching the next one just because, you know, they're going to watch it. Like I know a lot of people that watch Eternals didn't think like, you know, crazy things about it, but they were just going to watch it anyways because it's a given at that point. So now that we know that kind of consumer behavior continues to perpetuate in this like world building ecosystem, they're just going to go deeper and deeper. But Nintendo was doing that a long time ago. Like that was their strategy like 20 years ago, at least 30 years ago. Like the first Mario game that I played came out before I was born. And I think I was only just a few years old, and I'm still playing Mario games. Right.
Still,
so their strategy has been working. I feel like everybody else has just gotten wiser to it.
I think I'm gonna jump in real quick. They can hear me, by the way, too, Summer.
Okay, so, you never know. If they can hear us.
They can hear me. I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were kind of talking about like exactly what you just said, where Eternals, you have all these different franchise IPs, and people are just making them because they know people will watch them, right? And so they're not necessarily looking for like home runs. They're only in like a sports parlance, right? They're not necessarily looking for home runs. They're happy with singles and doubles, right? Because they just know. So for instance, they use Star Trek as an example in Paramount Plus. They have all these Star Trek shows that are coming out, but they're fine with like, they know that all the Star Trek people are going to watch it and come and make a subscription and, buy a subscription to Paramount Plus. And they're okay with it not being like the next Game of Thrones, right? Like they're just okay with it. So, cause they know they have that built-in audience that at the very least will get it. And if it crosses over, then, hey, cool. But they're very happy with like just that sort of middle of the road. We know that these fans will join and take a look at it.
Yeah, and just produce enough content in that universe to keep that fan base engaged and alive and not bored. But also, striking a balance where you're not just pumping out content that cheapens the brand too. So, some like I would say that Sony almost ran into that problem with so I don't know if you guys have heard, there's this really good NPR Planet Money episode on the Spider-Man problem and like the legalistic problem between Sony and Marvel. Marvel sold their Spider-Man IP to Sony decades ago. Sony has since made Spider-Man into like a mega hit. But Sony the only way that Sony can keep their IP is by continually making another Spider-Man every like 5.63 years or something kind of silly like that. So that's why we've had so many Spider-Mans in the last, 20 years. And in the middle where they had that Andrew Garfield era, it didn't do quite as well because they're just not as good as making those like incredible films that Marvel is now a pro at. So it's kind of interesting to see that balance they're attempting to be struck, but Sony not quite nailing it. I think they recovered a little bit with the Tom Holland era, but it'll be kind of interesting to see how they continue to manage that relationship and basically like desperately hold on to that IP without letting it slip away while overproducing content for a single comic book or hero.
Yeah. I think that the answer to that is what they call the Spider-Verse. Their multiverse of Spider-Man. They're going to be bringing back everybody from Miles to the Indian version of their version of Spider-Man to Gwen Stacy's version of Spider-Man. They got a whole bunch of them that they can go off of, and that's just the cinematic space. We're not even talking about animation, and plus other mini cartoons, and plus some of the stuff that Marvel can do with it as well. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon. We're definitely going to get our fill of it, but Sony is also, they've got a really good avenue regarding giving like high quality video games and comic book properties and giving them a voice. So don't be surprised if Bungie doesn't use that same pipeline as well, and you see like some kind of like Destiny-esque TV show or anime or movie in the works as well. A big shout out to the Funk who said to my response earlier regarding if Halo was going to be if Sony's going to have access to Halo. He was like, nah, Microsoft owns Halo, lock, stock, and barrel. So that answers that particular question. But, depending on, and I'm sure Sony's paying attention to what Paramount Plus does with the Halo series, Destiny has a very rich and robust story, as deep as Halo's in a lot of different ways. And people love that starry space bounty hunter moving from planet to planet kind of thing, figuring out what's what evils lurk in the hearts of the planet kind of storyline. So it's perfect. They're built for that.
Mm-hmm. So we touched on this a little bit in our crosstalk, but the live action Halo TV show has a release date now, and it was revealed in a new teaser trailer. So Paramount Plus has debuted 2 new trailers for the long-awaited live action Halo series, revealing its fast approaching March 24th, 2022 release date. So that's just around the corner, like just barely over a month away, a month and a half. Are you going to watch it? Are you much of a Halo player? You don't have to say yes to this one. I know I'm not, but that doesn't mean I don't love the series and appreciate what it's done for gaming.
Yeah. I love the game. I know I've got a very good overview of the storyline. I'm not as deep into the Halo lore as some people are, because there are books, there's novels that go really deep into the lore, and there's a lot of story that you can pull from. But based off of what I've seen, as far as the imagery goes, I'm all in, regardless of some of the hesitations that some people do feel. And it's not perfect, but I'm certainly going to be showing up. What is it, March 22nd? Is that what you said it's coming out?
March 24th.
Yeah, March 24th. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you don't know what the Halo's overall storyline is, it's just going to be cool to see the pretty pictures.
I don't know anything about what Master Chief has been doing, but I know he got like lost for some time. I don't know. And then he came back. I saw a trailer. It was pretty exciting. I got pretty pumped about it. And I've literally never even played the game. I mean, I did play it a little bit in college, but not enough to really get like that attached to it. But whatever Master Chief is up to, I might drop in and see how he's doing.
Hey, but there are a couple of small little caveats that people have issues with. One is Master Chief's size. You don't really get a really full size. He's a big dude, and he's not necessarily depicting that in the imagery that's shown in the trailer. Cortana, some people have a problem with Cortana, which is his artificial intelligent partner that lives in the back of his head, and he can. I
hear we got a reveal what she looks like. So she's never been embodied before. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. The original creator of Cortana has been revealed in the games as a regular human being, and she is based off of that human being. But as far as the construct that Master Chief sees, never. This is the first time we've actually seen flesh on her digital bones. And it looks really good, but some people feel some kind of way about it. And then, of course, the other big thing is the voice. We've had Master Chief's a certain voice as Master Chief for 20 years almost, it seemed like. Damn near. I forgot how long it's been, at least 15 years. And now we have a new voice that is Master Chief. And if it's a little unsettling for the moment, I'm sure we'll get used to it.
Is it trying to be the same voice, or is it like this is a younger version and like definitely a different person? Because that's a long time for a voice actor to be on the same job. No matter 20 years, people age in that time. Like that person's voice has to have changed.
Yeah. I mean, it's close enough if you're trying to get a relative. It's not jarring, like, so it's not like something that's completely left field. It's just not the original. So, and the guy, and I think the young man that's playing Master Chief is the same guy that played in American Gods. He was like the main character in American Gods, if I remember right. Oh, thank you, Ryder. He just sent me an IMDb page regarding him. Maybe not. No, I think that no, that isn't him. Well, anyways, it can be just a little jarring, but I think we'll all get used to it. We just want to see Master Chief do his thing.
He's in American Gods. He's also, I personally knew him from, he's in The Wire, season 2 of The Wire. He plays the nephew. He plays Nikki, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's who's Master Chief.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he would be buff enough for that.
Yeah.
But,
so I mean, obviously, Wire was like, a long time ago. So So he's definitely older, but that's who it is. So I was really surprised about that too. Like that was him.
That's interesting. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, it looks pretty.
All right. Well, if a $69 billion acquisition of Activision and a $4 billion acquisition of Bungie isn't enough to convince you that the video game industry has a lot of money in it, and that it's a big money-making machine, it even trickles down to the individual personal level. So a sealed Sega Genesis Madden game has sold to an individual for $400,000. Because that stuff is that valuable. It's that valuable if somebody pays that much money for it. Yeah.
Ooh, good Lord, that's a lot of money.
I hope that's a good investment on that guy's part. I'm sure it will be. Just the fact that it was bought for that much in the beginning, I feel like it's going to sell for more because now it's got a splashy PR story attached to it. But
yeah,
would you? I don't know.
No, I mean that seems like way overkill. I get why it's selling now because the namesake of the game, John Madden, who used to be a coach, he passed away a couple of weeks ago. So I can understand why people want to get it now because the scarcity of seeing his face on these games anymore is going to be gone. So I get that, but 400 stacks? Golly, hell no, I'm not paying that much for it, man. Why? How do you resell that? Like, I don't know. It's just weird. It was weird when they did it with the Zelda game. I think they did it with a Mario game too, not too terribly long ago.
Yeah. It's just a symbol of a cultural icon. It's important. Yeah. Right? It's important. It's definitely impactful culture, but it's just a lot of money.
That's a lot of dough. That's a lot of dough for a game you are not going to play.
I just don't know about that. I hope that guy made a wise investment. I hope he gets at least something back, some sort of return that's fair for him. But good Lord, that's just a little bit too much for me. It's a little out of my price range. So Epic has largely lost to Apple, but 35 states are now backing its fight in a higher court. So summary of this story goes as follows. So 25 U.S. state attorneys general, the EFF, Microsoft, and many special interest groups have filed support in Epic v. Apple appeal regarding the denouncing Apple's monopoly over distribution on iOS applications. So Epic Games may have largely lost most of its major lawsuit that it had against Apple that we covered pretty heavily last year, but it's not going down without a fight, and it has some major support backing it up in its corner. So soon after the Epic Games v. Apple ruling was issued, Epic appealed, and on January 17th, a large coalition of 35 state attorneys general, Microsoft, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation has taken up the fight with Epic to kind of battle it out. So in summary, Apple has a complete monopoly and complete control over the distribution of any sales that goes through its iOS products, iOS devices. So basically via the App Store, they take out a major cut of the profits, of the revenue. And Epic was really pushing back on that because Epic tried to subvert Apple by selling their V-Bucks, their in-game currency for Fortnite, off the Apple Store in an actual epic.com, somewhere on a browser. And then you could take that currency and spend it in the iOS version of Fortnite. Apple got super mad about it. That was against their policy. They sued. Apple basically won, but a lot of people are still pushing to change that policy and enable them to sell currency in a way that's not exclusively through this monopolistic practice where Apple controls the distribution completely. So what do you think? I know that's a lot of stuff right there, but Thoughts?
Well, I've been scratching my head on this. I've been scratching my head on this for a while because I'm like, they created their own platform. That is their platform that they created to put their games and have anybody on their platform who they deem fit. So for them to say it's a monopoly, it's just I just don't see how they connect the dots. I mean, Apple isn't even like isn't even leading the market with phones in the United States, and definitely not in the world. They're not leading the market in computing devices as far as computers are concerned at all either. So it's just weird. Now I know it's an easy target because they're the big bully, and somebody just tried their shot and missed. So you might as well go for it. So I get that, but the whole like, I demand to be able to walk in your house and, eat and do what I want in your house is just odd to me. I've never been able to connect those dots.
I think that makes sense on its face, but when you look at the context so yes, Apple does not have a majority market share of all phone devices in the US. However, it has a pretty fucking huge chunk of it, right? And for the rest of the world too. Really, if you want to sell or you want to distribute like a mobile game per se, or any sort of mobile app, like you absolutely have to distribute it on iOS and Android. Android is produced and distributed and blah, blah, blah by a ton of different companies, but Apple is by far the biggest player in the mobile device ecosystem, right? Nobody even comes close to competing with it. So to say that, Apple built this ecosystem and is controlling it, therefore you have to go by my rules, I think that makes sense on its face, but it kind of doesn't acknowledge that Apple also pretty much owns like just a massive portion of the market. And is that really fair? Is that really fair when like everybody has just accepted that Apple controls all iPhones, therefore we all have to do what Apple does?
It's called the iPhone because they made it. Like, it's just, I get why people are mad at Apple. I totally get it because they're the most profitable company in the world. I get that. So, you're going to sit on the throne. There's going to be shots, you're going to take shots at the throne. But when you sit down and you just really think about it, it's like you build your house, you've lived in it, and you have family and guests that come in there and they're like, well, I demand that you let me into your fridge. I demand that it's like, this is your house. You built it and they built a damn good house that doesn't leak. They make sure that all the money, if you're going to play ball in here that I built, you're going to pay me X amount of money. Now, if I'm a developer, of course I'm gonna feel some kind of way because I feel like I've built this cool little program and I want people on that particular device to use it. And I want to be able to dictate my own price. Or I can go to where the other majority is. Now, Apple does have the majority in sales, but I don't believe they have the majority regarding devices. And especially, like I said, especially globally, there's a whole other world that you can go out there and sell to, but it's just Apple's device is hot. It's just the hottest one out. I know. So
you don't think there's a point at which like Apple can get too big? Because the part where like it makes sense on its face, but once they're a certain size, then it has an outsized influence on the market, right? And so then it's like it starts to kind of like buff up against like antitrust principles. At what point is something too big, has too much control over an entire market, an entire ecosystem? If Apple goes away, it can basically dictate the terms of not just its own like direct control over what they have, but also, send rippling effects throughout the rest of the industry, even over things that they don't own, because they're so big, they can basically set the standard for anything. So that's where I feel like there's a point where it becomes too big and then it's like not really a fair market anymore, right? There isn't fair competition. So Apple,
there's a whole majority. There's a majority market that is out there, but it's just not as profitable as their smaller, more niche market. And then, so monopolies, like let's just take Bell, for example, before it split into AT&T and before it split into Singular and all this other stuff, like Bell had a monopoly. They were the only phone service in the country. That was it. And the government was like, you absolutely got to break this up. That makes sense. There was no other option, period. You either went with Bell or you didn't have a phone, so that makes sense. Where they're breaking up something like the oil barons, or they broke up Standard Oil because there was no other place to get it. There are no other options unless you legitimately physically go overseas to get oil. That is a monopoly. This is a monopoly on paper. It's not a real monopoly. There are other options. It's just people don't want to use them because they're not as profitable. There's a difference.
I mean, okay, so as a consumer, they don't have a monopoly, right? Like as a consumer, I can buy either a Samsung Android device or I can find an Apple. But when we're talking about the other perspective, of the developers, then it's a lot more nuanced, right? Because if you want to distribute an app and supposedly make it available to everybody in the world that would want to, or at least everybody in your country, then you have two choices. You can either do it on the Google Play Store, or just Android devices. You can still publish and distribute apps not through Google Play. So it's not like Google has a complete lock and key on all Android devices. It doesn't, right? But Apple is different. If you have an Apple device, you have to use the App Store. And if you're a publisher, if I am trying to make a game and I want it to get it out as many customers as possible, it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to go choose my customers or choose my marketplace. Like I want to make it available to everybody. And I have two choices to do it: Apple or iOS and Android. And when you cut out half of the market, or that part of the market has such a hold that you can't even like negotiate terms, you can't, they take such a huge portion out of your revenue, then that does hurt developers because they can't distribute the same way that they can on Android. It's not quite.
But can they still distribute?
They can still distribute.
And can they still distribute to a majority market?
They can, but I think so. My thought is
I eventually listen. I do think eventually Apple's going to have to give it up. They're going to have to. It seems like it's inevitability. They're going to have way too many people gunning for them, and just like Standard Oil and Bell and all them, it will be broken in a way so that other people can have a fair chance at the market. But it's just the way that they're describing it to me is it just sounds silly. Let's just call it what it is. You got too big and we want a piece of it. Now, if they said that, I'd be like, yeah, y'all got too big and we want a piece of it. We need to break your big profitable ass down. But it's the moral high ground that I guess that's more of the thing that gets me more so than everything. It's like, how could they do this? Well, they built it. Of course they can do that. They you know how many billions and billions of dollars in research and development that they made to create this device. And now they're being forced to have to dictate towards somebody else's terms on how to use it and how to profit from it. If I created that, I would feel some kind of way. I just want people to call it for what it is. Stop trying to sound noble about it. It's just like they're too big, they make too much money, and I want in. Say that, and I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But don't sit here and try to tell me that it's some kind of noble effort and that these poor developers don't have any other choice, because that's just simply not the case.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anybody's arguing that anything about capitalism is noble or moral, right? So I'm with you there.
No, that's true.
I'm definitely with you there. However, a free and open market with lots of competition and lots of options is also a good thing. I don't know about moral thing. I think it's a good thing. And it would certainly be a good thing for consumers if Apple would be less restrictive, right? Because Epic tried to sell their V-Bucks to consumers, their digital currency, to consumers outside of the App Store. And if other developers can do that, then, what's to say that those developers publishing those games wouldn't offer those kind of in-game currency for cheaper options or cheaper prices outside of the App Store? But the App Store takes like 30%. And so they're kind of locked into a place where they can't actually access their consumers and give them pricing options because they can only sell them in one marketplace within the App Store. They can't give it to them online. So that's really what started the whole thing. So a broad ruling from Apple would leave, this is a quote from the article saying, a broad ruling from Apple could leave little room for a limited principle to prevent Apple from leveraging its control of iOS to foreclose competition in countless adjacent markets. So basically, Microsoft is saying that it's too big and it controls too much of the market, and it's not really a free market anymore. If they get to a certain point, which, I know this is fun disagreeing with you because we end up always agreeing on everything, but I actually agree with Microsoft on this one. It's kind of fun to finally spar for once in a while. All right, so then they go on to say that a holistic review of the district court's factual findings will show that Apple does have market power in app distribution, and that its proffered justifications for restrictive App Store policies do not outweigh the anti-competitive effects of those policies. So basically they're saying that, yes, they have control, but it's not so much control at this point, which is what the judge has said, that it becomes like it starts veering into antitrust character. It seems like it came really close, and that seems to be the fundamental argument against Apple. But it seems like the judge ruled not against Apple in this case. But I don't know. I would like to see more competition. There's been a lot of acquisitions, as we just said, in the video game industry. I think more competition is better. When you have these big players acquiring everything and completely owning the distribution methods of playing games, when you have these big players like Apple completely controlling the financial pipelines, the revenue, the percentage of revenue that everybody gets to keep, that's just more control and a more restrictive market. And I think a freer, more open market would benefit developers and it would benefit consumers. Of course, it's going to develop or benefit us, but I think specifically there is a case to be made for it for it to benefit developers, because the more it benefits them, the more they can innovate, the more they can play or develop indie games, develop games that we haven't seen before, make, interesting new monetization models. Like, that doesn't sound very exciting, but it can be really exciting and really beneficial to us as consumers. So less restriction is a good thing to me. That's my thought. But gross, I feel like I sound like a libertarian, just guessing.
Well, there's 35 states. I mean, there's only like 15 left, right? To try and like persuade to get on your cause. So that's very telling in itself.
Right. And
it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. All in all, I think we have not heard the last of this story. We covered it pretty heavily last year. It's already January. We're already getting back into it. So I think there's more to come. Stay tuned on more updates regarding the story. We will bring them here to you on GeekBeast every day or every weekday, 7:30, right? I'll see you guys next Monday, and Trey will see you guys tomorrow. I think that's it for tonight. Good night, guys.